accessibility was one of the main criteria for me to come to college. I think it means just that I can be independent, like as anybody else, regardless of my disability.
Accessibility wasn't like the end-all be-all for choosing a school. Accessibility to me means just having equal opportunity to reach an end result.
First, that really stood out to me when I came and visited UT. What was its accessibility? I think 2 points that I really wanted to get out of this documentary is first that accessibility is not just for people who are limited physically, but it's really a concept and an idea that we should all be thinking about. The point of including accessibility into the other topics that we are talking about is not so much to elevate it in a way where it's saying one thing is more important than another. It's more to integrate it as a piece of a puzzle.
UT is always busy with students going from class to class, and most students have the benefit of navigating campus without questioning physical accessibility. I too was one of those students until I met Ioana and became friends with her, and we decided to make this documentary. On UT's campus, we see students on bikes, golf carts, automobiles, and motorized chairs, including wheelchairs. To begin our project, we first reached out to students and staff on campus to hear about their experience with physical accessibility.
So for the dorms, I actually had the opportunity to meet Nora Harmon, she's the director of housing, and she was actually really helpful. And I would always, well, now I'm an RA, but before, when I had regular roommates, I would meet with her before the housing selection, and she would ask me what I wanted, or if I was in a room that was not accessible, she would ask me if I needed any railings in the bathroom or anything like that she could help me with.
Even though I may need to use the ramp or the elevator versus stairs, having the ability to still get to the same location is very important to me. If I needed to have some sort of academic accommodation, whether it's a different format of testing style, like having a different lab size table with the questions on them instead of the big tall ones that are in labs. That's important to me because everyone's taking the same test. I just would be needing to take it at a different height. Shannon Kalega, she is a UT alumni, and I was talking to her. I was a sophomore in high school, just trying to get information about college and figuring out accommodations and what to look for in universities when applying and things like that. And she told me about her personal experiences at UT with dealing with accommodations. And it worked out great because she has the same medical condition as me, so what works for her would more often work for me.
When looking at colleges, accessibility was absolutely 100%, probably the top of my criteria list. When I came to UT, I met with Bob Ruday, former dean of students, and he at the time was also over disability services. I will never forget, he said that if I brought the hard work and the academic grit to the game, he'd make sure I had no physical barriers. And I'm like, yep, I'm coming to UT. So it was because UT was so open and saying, he said, I'll move a classroom to a location if you need it moved, if this is where your class is supposed to be. My experience with physical accessibility is versus student versus a staff member, I would say the difference has really been internal for me. As a student, I wasn't very vocal. I was that student that never registered with disability services. Bob Ruday knew I was here, and if I needed something, I would go and talk to him, but I never asked for any accommodations. I should have, but I didn't. And now as a staff member, having the education and working with students with different abilities, I think it's helped me become more of an advocate for my students and also for myself. But I still find myself advocating harder for my students than myself.
We then went to the Academic Success Center, where we spoke with Liz Shep. Liz is the head of Disability Services and the single primary staff member that oversees 650 students who are registered with Disability Services.
Go based on what the student needs, I will say, like, some things might be a little bit more common. So, like you said, if there's a student in a wheelchair, then they might need, if they live on campus, they might need to have a room that can accommodate that. They might need like a roll-in shower or something along those lines. Some of the rooms are also designated for ADA, so they're bigger, they're like wider, and so they might be eligible for one of those rooms, or they might need key access to open doors and things like that. As far as academics, like I said, that will really vary. So we can put special desks in the classrooms if needed for the student. And then depending on if the student needs something, we would provide that, but it really does vary. So students will fill out an online request form, which is on the main UT website. They should also be supplying supporting documentation on the website, although they can supply that directly to me if needed. And once I get their documentation and their request, usually then that will prompt them to make a meeting with me. So they would meet with me to discuss their accommodation needs on campus. Depending on what those are, if they're academically related, they'll get what's called a letter of accommodation, which they give to their professors. If it's something more kind of like behind the scenes, like a housing accommodation or something like that, I usually would just communicate directly with that department.
On UT's website, you can find information about ADA standards. Some of the accommodations they have are elevators, ramps, handicap parking, some paved crosswalks, and automatic opening doors. On the surface, UT seems to be up to par with ADA standards. However, there are other situations to consider.
I took a class last year, I think, that it had service learning hours required, and it was a little challenging because we had to find our own place to do the hours, and a lot of the places that were nearby like asked for me to be American, and that so I couldn't go there, and so I ended up going to like a place farther away, and it was challenging for transportation and all that, and like I was not really asked about like how if I had a car or like if I had like the means to like go there, but in the end I like had to manage by myself and it worked out.
One of the biggest issues with our campus is the fact that we have cobblestones. The downside is that we don't always have the most level roadways, and that poses extreme hardships for anybody who is wheelchair bound. So individuals have brought up problems with accessibility on campus in my position in student government, and it's kind of been the same thing of that. And there was even a point brought up where there was in Morsani a handicap swipe that was right behind a trash can. How can you, that just doesn't work.
So someone, I guess you could say that's close to me, has had accessibility issues. She is a mentee. I'm a mentor for a Pathways to Honors class, freshman seminar class. She's one of my mentees in my class, and she is in a wheelchair and has a service animal. And I've just experienced like a few things, like personally, like something that I like felt so bad about, I felt like I did wrong, was like first semester we did like a out of class trip to Eddie and Sam's downtown. We walked there, and she like messaged me and was like, hey, like I've never actually like been downtown before, like do you think I'll be okay with my wheelchair? And I was like, yes, but like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't even like consider that. I'm so sorry you felt like you needed to ask, but like, yes, like you should be okay. And then another thing is we originally had class first semester in Plant Hall, which was fine because she could take the elevator. Everything was fine for her to have access to. And then we switched to the John Sykes building for the second semester. And I've just noticed it's like kind of harder for her, like even just like with the door, like she's like trying to hold the door and like have her dog and like, you know, use her wheelchair at the same time. So it's just not like the same.
So right now we're at the University of Tampa Sykes College of Business, where we just found out that this door doesn't work. So Ioana, would you mind showing me how you actually get inside Sykes?
Sure, of course.
And it's not just one door, it's many doors. The issue doesn't just stop there. Many of the handicap buttons are placed in areas unreachable, such as behind umbrella bags or off the pavement. The reason the doors do not work are because they are switched off.
I've had very few issues of, having doors that don't open, but normally I can either get them open myself or there's a good Samaritan walking by that'll open the door for me. Most of the sidewalks and crosswalks are very easy to get around on in my manual wheelchair. There are some spots where the drainage between the sidewalk and the road are more heavily, dipped in. And those, I know where they are for the most part, and I know to avoid those areas.
So we actually do have on the website something called Access Barrier Report Form. And people can, it's not just for students, it's for anyone who wants to report an access issue on campus. They can go in and report it. It's primarily for either a physical barrier that they're encountering or a technological barrier that they're encountering. So they can fill out that form and it goes directly to myself and facilities. And then depending on what the issue is, it'll be managed. The Access Barrier Report Form, it's not used as much as I would like it to be used. It's something that I really would want to push people to do. That would be the primary way. Of course, people can just email me or let me know that there's an issue. But if you were talking about formalized reporting, that would be where we would ask them to go.
The goal of this documentary is also to open up the discussion on physical disabilities and how we can raise more awareness to them.
I think, in my specific role in the diversity advisory group, we've invited Liz in to help educate our group. We do a evaluation at the end about, all the different topics that we talk about. And I just got the results back, and the conversations that we've had around disability and ability have been the most impactful about all, regarding all of our topics, because the feedback that I've gotten from students, unless they're personally impacted, they're really not in conversations at the same level as they are around conversations of race or religion, and it's really just as important to be having this conversation as well.
We had to read 2 articles about disabilities, and that kind of was people take pride in them. You shouldn't feel bad for someone that has a disability. It's part of who they are. And then we did an interactive online thing, and you could kind of see there was different I don't want to say games, but it was you would put your headphones in, you could see what it's like to have ADHD or see what it's like to have a reading disability, and it was kind of just an interactive thing. And then at the same time, after that, we talked about people who have physical disabilities where they're in a wheelchair or something of that nature, and how we need to be more cautious of that.
Accessibility on a college campus is important because it gives equal access to every student, and every student deserves to have equal access to their education. Also, the campus community is supposed to be home, it's supposed to be where you're comfortable, it's supposed to be where you learn, and so everyone deserves to feel that way on their campus.
So I think at the University of Tampa, the way to raise more awareness about accessibility, specifically physical accessibility, I think is just having the conversation.
Diversity topics are hard to talk about. When you talk about diversity topics, many times you're actually looking internally.
We need to think about ways that we can bring awareness to the whole campus community. And I think that in order to do that, it's kind of a mix. You need people advocating on the administrative side, on the leadership side of the university, and then you also need students advocating through student organizations and different groups.
So I want individuals who do have physical disabilities to be awarded the opportunities to have a voice in student government, because allies are extremely important, and I want everybody within student government next year to take it very seriously, to actually advocate and fight for the rights of others. But that being said, I cannot say, oh, I know exactly what it's like to have a physical handicap or a physical disability. And so that being said, with that representation, there also comes understanding.
And even, professors having conversations in the classroom, because I don't think it's a one size fits all. It kind of needs to permeate.
I think just on a larger level, kind of on a global level, I think that the conversations need to happen in more of a positive light, not oh, we have to do this, but we want to do this.
As Ioana and I prepare to graduate, we want to leave students with this video not only to serve as a reminder to care for one another, but to encourage UT to keep the conversation going about physical accessibility.